laptop is still on camera. Welcome, everyone, to All the Things. This is a show where we discuss all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life. And as you can see, the chair is empty. It's a very sad day. Our dear friend Monique is sick in bed and pretty much has been since our New Year's Eve party. I don't know, maybe it was too much partying on the show. I'm Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom, and this is the show where we discuss the cultural issues of the day in light of the historic Christian worldview. And I'm glad you're here, and I want to introduce you to our special guest co-host today, my friend Rachel Shockey. Welcome, Rachel. Yay! Oh, there we go. Yes, I've got my hoop earrings on too. Now we hear you. Okay. So I also want to let people know that Bob is helping us out today and Emily, but their camera is broken. So we can't see them. We see the overhead cam. There we go. There's the big one. Abby's keeping Monique company. And we want to thank everyone for checking out our New Year's Eve party. It was a lot of fun. But like I said, Monique's out sick. And so Rachel's filling in. So Rachel, it's good to have you here. You're coming to us all the way from the East Coast.
Yeah, Clearwater, Florida, Scientology capital of the world.
Right. So we got those tinfoil helmets going.
That's right.
And we're ready to talk about things on the, should we call this the coast to coast edition of All the Things?
Ooh.
Oh, wait, we have a stormtrooper in the house.
Nice. Oh man, we could spend a whole show just talking about the new Star Wars movie, but there's too many, too many people that probably haven't seen it yet. So
well, Abby made a helmet out of foam, so Emily's trying it on here. This is nice. This is my family. Yep. So I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and click on the share button as we're talking and help share the show. It's a great way to support the show. Want to welcome Rachel's friends and mother-in-law just who are watching the show. Go ahead and like, follow, share, do all the things so that you can keep in touch with us. And also join us on YouTube for the live chat so that we can hear where you are watching us today and enjoying the show. And plus, we love to take your questions. So we had a great time. I don't know, Rachel, did you catch any of the New Year's Eve party that we had a few nights ago?
I did. I was eyeing that cake from miles away.
Yes, the cake was pretty epic. Abby did a very good job with the cake. I don't know what camera I'm looking at. There, I'm looking at this one. It's a little different setup tonight. I don't know where to look. So we had a good time reminiscing and talking about how to help the poor. That was a good conversation. We talked about some New Year's goals for the year. So I want to encourage everyone to be sure to catch the replay if you missed it. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. So go make sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. Yes. That's a nice graphic.
I like it.
So, yeah. Okay, so
like the headphones over those bucks.
So Rachel, you're here. We're going to interview you a little bit. We had scheduled originally to have you on the show several months ago, and then we had a scheduling conflict come up. And so we thought, hey, let's pick that up and talk to you about your life as an artist and an apologist. So that'll be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. And you're also a Methodist.
Yes.
Lifelong Methodist. And
well, since marriage.
Yeah. Okay.
But I've been at Wesleyan's for lifelong Wesleyan. So
well, you'll have to break that down even what the difference is, because to me those are the same thing, Wesleyans and Methodists. So, but we're going to talk about recent developments in the United Methodist Church, and Rachel has been keeping me abreast of that over the last several months. And there was a big announcement, big article today in the New York Times about it. and the division among the United Methodists. So I thought it would be great, since we were having Rachel on the show, we could also talk about what is happening in the UMC. And Emily is still wearing the Stormtrooper helmet. She's running the sound.
This is an added bonus to the show.
Yes.
I feel like we might need to use some Star Wars sound effects during the show, though.
Yeah, maybe I should get you and Emily on here to talk about the Mandalorian. You guys could give a little
I'm
review.
up for it.
She says yes, thumbs up to that. All right. Well, let's get started here. Rachel, I think that what's really cool, when I first met you a couple of years, it was about a year and a half ago now, I got to know you, and you just have a really interesting background of both as an artist, but also as a Christian apologist. And so I thought it would be great to talk about those two worlds that you are trying to bridge. So let's start with the art. Tell us a little bit about your journey into becoming an artist and getting interested in art.
Yeah. So I was born in 1984. That tells you my age.
I'm sort of depressed right now. I'm kind of old enough to be your mother.
Well, about a month ago, Krista and I were visiting with each other, and I revealed that basically she was in college when I was a child.
Yes.
So
I'm very depressed.
Yes. That evening took a turn.
Yes.
So I was born in 1984, and many children in the 80s and early 90s got to see Bob Ross on Saturday mornings on PBS. And I used to be glued to the television set. My dad would come down the stairs making fun of him and, making his little voices about the happy little tree right in here. But I was glued to that. I loved watching him paint. And I just, from a very young age, have just always loved art. My mother always encouraged it. Several of my family members, my grandparents, some of my uncles have always been involved some way in the arts, and just it was kind of around me. So I was encouraged. I love to go to the library and look at all the picture books of all the great artists and their work, and I would try, my hardest to recreate them. So it's just been something that I've always enjoyed. And
now, were you an art major in college?
I was not. I decided I wanted to keep that separate. So my undergrad is in English and communication.
I think maybe Emily could relate to that a little bit. She likes art, but she is an English writing major at Biola. So
and writing, as we'll discuss, is an art form as well. So, and I love stories, and art. Visual art is storytelling in a different way.
Yeah.
So.
Well, tell us about the kind of art that you do. Like, I see a couple paintings behind you. I'm wondering if maybe those are things that you've created. What medium do you mainly do your art in? Yeah, so until probably 3 or 4 years ago, my main medium was oil. I just love the creaminess of it. And it's so shiny. I love it. But I started working with watercolors about 4 years ago, and I'm loving it. So I've been doing a lot more realism with my watercolors. I try to do some of that with my oils. We're showing some of your paintings on the screen right now. Bob's on your website, and we want to let people know if they want to go browse your paintings. Some of them are for sale, and they can go check them out. You have a shop on Etsy too, where you make jewelry and Christmas ornaments and all kinds of things. So people can all kinds of fun things. Yeah, check that out. It's mostly, so RachelShockeyStudio.com. Thanks for that. Yeah, the work I do is mostly in realism. I'm trying to push into photorealism. I love surrealism just because it's quirky and fun. So when you talk about realism, I'm assuming that means art, because I know nothing about art. I have two very artistic children, but they must get that 100% from my husband. Okay, they're telling me to look at the right camera. So I don't know anything about realism or surrealism. Like, what would the differences between those be? Yeah, so surrealism would be taking something that looks real and then making it
like odd, like some people will paint a big painting of a Pez dispenser, but there's something punny about it, but it looks real, but you don't realize until you get close that it's not real, that's not a photo, and then there's something funny about it that you kind of have to look at it more deeply. So that's kind of more surrealism, I guess, in a way. And then realism is basically trying to depict something very realistically. So like a lot of portraits, people will try to do something where it looks like a photograph. So that's photorealism is pushing more of that boundary. And there are so many amazing artists in the world today that can achieve such amazing detail where they even get like the pores in people's skin and the hairs all over their face. It's amazing.
I want you to move your head for a minute so we could see the painting right behind you.
Oh, yes.
That's one of yours. And there's another
There's
one.
another.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know that another one of your passions is apologetics. So talk to us a little bit about that journey into apologetics.
Yeah, that's a interesting story because so in my undergrad, I went there to study English language and literature and communication because I love stories. And I decided, because one of my professors, who was my mentor there, encouraged me to apply to a study abroad program that was at Oxford University. So I applied, not thinking I would get accepted because I've always struggled in school. And so he encouraged me to apply, write my essay and everything. And I got accepted, shockingly. So I went, and the experience was not what I had expected. I was more overwhelmed with the conversations that I had with fellow students that came in the program who were coming from Christian universities, who had been raised on the mission field. Some of their parents were pastors, and some of them, and then a lot of the people that I encountered through lectures, on the street, at the library, had great questions about Christianity or objections to it that I did not feel prepared to answer. And I had experiential knowledge that the Holy Spirit was real. I had gone through my own period of doubt when I was about 15 to 16. I really was struggling with whether or not God existed, and if he did, I didn't think he was good. And somebody mentored me, and then I went on a couple missions trips and saw miracles and just witnessed the power of the Holy Spirit. So I knew that God was real, and I had some good reasons for believing that that Christ was real and that he had resurrected. But it wasn't until that experience that I realized none of this stuff matters if I can't explain, if I don't know what I believe, and if I can't explain, why I believe it. So it kind of sent me on this course of just reading a lot of material by Christian apologists, predominantly Reverend Zacharias, William Lane Craig, a couple other great writers and speakers. And so I watched a lot of videos and listened to podcasts. And then it finally just became really clear that the Lord was leading me in the direction to go get my master's in apologetics.
So you just graduated a couple weeks ago with your MA in Christian apologetics from Talbot. Okay, there's the right camera. And so as you were going through your program, talk to us a little bit about how you saw art intersecting with your interest in apologetics, because it sounds like you started studying apologetics because, I wouldn't say it was a crisis of faith, but after going to Oxford, you started realizing like, wow, there's a lot of questions I don't know the answers to. And but I know that you didn't probably leave your interest in art behind. So talk to us a little bit about that intersection.
Yeah, so it actually, that intersection between apologetics and arts also started at Oxford. It really was a pivotal semester in my life that changed really the course of where I thought I was going to go with my education and just everything else, because it also helped me to pick the long essay that I would choose to do through the whole semester, that I would research and propose a question to answer. And the question I chose to answer was, how does society shape the morals of a culture? And also, how did authors specifically during the period of the rise of the novel in England. How did authors help shape morals within a society? And so I looked at a couple of different books. Pamela was one of them. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, looking at how she was kind of helping to shape how women were seen and relationships. And
now Emily would want to know,
society.
like, where were the Bronte sisters? Because she
Yeah,
much prefers the Bronte sisters over Jane Austen.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't include them, but they are amazing. I agree. And then I brought in a Christian author, one of my favorites, Francine Rivers. I actually wrote her and asked her about a couple of things with regard to her book. And anyway, so the thing that I was curious about is, can the arts help to convey truth and shape morals? And can they influence culture? And so it really struck me as an interesting idea to look at conversion experiences with regard to the arts. Like, if people had engaged with a painting or saw a play or heard a song that really struck home and helped them to see the truth of Christianity and maybe sent them on a course of searching. So that was what I had set out to do with the master's. I predominantly went through the master's program with the idea in mind that I would write this thesis, which I just finished this year, on that topic. And I looked at conversion experiences in the United Kingdom through from 350 BC, or sorry, AD through the 1900s. So
now I know that you even developed, as part of your thesis project, an art exhibit. So talk to us about that, and how you say this word, because I see this on social media all the time and I don't know what this is called.
Yeah, it's an Old English. I love Old English literature. So it's Old English. It's a hoppy and toe is how you say it. So you have that like huh sound, a hoppy and toe. And it basically means to place your faith in, your trust in. And so it's giving my apologetic, my reasons for faith in Christ. So it's telling my story within God's bigger story. So that's why it says a meta narrative of the ultimate narrative. So
I'm going to have Bob scroll down here a little bit so people can kind of get a feel for some of the pieces that are in this show. And it's actually a traveling show. Yeah, keep scrolling there.
Right.
So if keep going. So if people want to have the show come to them, they can actually contact you and sponsor this experience to come to them, of this blending of apologetics and art. So talk to us a little bit about the experience that you have created here.
Yeah, I wanted it to be immersive. I wanted it to be something that would cause introspection and a safe place to be presented with some ideas for why I believe in Christ, and where they can ask questions and if they would like to receive prayer. So this is an exhibit that is comfortably suited for a university, not just a Christian university, but a secular university. If you want to have it, for a Christian chapter that you have at your church, it is a traveling exhibit, and I can come and then speak to whoever comes to the exhibit or the church or the university about some of the themes that are presented in the pieces. So they're stations, and it's a sensory exhibit. So you have a painting, there's poetry or prose with it, and a scent that is basically drawn from that time in my life when this idea or concept helped convince me that Christianity was true, or has continued to help bolster my faith. And then there's also a question at each station and a book to be able to answer. So it's a quiet exhibit. People are encouraged to come in and to take their time at each station, and one person at a time, to take in what the message is. And there's a pamphlet that goes with it as well, and explains more of the story behind the piece and the main concept. And so they're given great opportunity to really think about what's being presented and why this was impactful to me with regard to leading me to to Christianity and why I continue to be a Christian.
Now,
So
if people live in Southern California, this experience is actually going to be part of the Women in Apologetics conference that's coming up in just a few weeks at Biola University. So if people are coming to the conference, they could actually go check out this experience and walk through it.
right.
So
Exactly.
there's one really neat piece I want Bob to put on the screen if he can here. It's also part of the exhibit. Yeah, it's very cool. I really like that one.
This is so funny, I have to say, because my husband knows, and this piece gave me the most trouble. I was really struggling with how to convey this very special story that highlighted a very difficult but also amazing time in my family's life. And I had one canvas, scratched it because it was just awful. It just was not coming together. And I just kept praying, Lord, please give me your inspiration. What do you want this piece to look like? And then this image just popped into my mind. So this is what you see. So it's funny because when I first opened the exhibit here in Florida, somebody asked me, what's your favorite piece? And I said, well, my testimonial piece, which was the first one I painted, which is called The Condition of the Heart. And then I said, well, what's your favorite piece? And most everybody said this one, which I thought was funny. I said, you know what? I said, I will learn to love it. Right now, I have a love-hate relationship with it because I was so frustrated with getting
it's
it
neat
down.
to kind of hear some of the backstory there on that piece, because I really enjoyed that one as well. So tell us what inspires you. Are there any particular artists or pieces of art that have inspired you in your career as an artist?
I get inspired by different things. Books. I love sci-fi fantasy books and shows, and I just get inspired by the color and the way that they're able to convey emotion. And I'm a member of Christians in the Visual Arts, SIVA, and I just love looking at the stuff that's produced in their scene journal that I get sent 4 times a year. And then they have lots of different shows. The Still Point Gallery that's at RZIM. I love seeing what they're putting up there. And then also you've been to one, at least I know of, the Fellowship of Performing Arts, where they have the C.S. Lewis productions.
Yes.
Those are really inspiring for me to continue to do what I'm doing because, C.S. Lewis did do that. He did incorporate the arts in apologetics.
Yeah, it's a great vision. And I know that you're also a Tolkien fan, and that's another one of your inspirations.
Yeah.
So if you were to describe your endeavor, would you describe yourself as a Christian artist or as an artist who is a Christian, if you know what I'm asking?
I would say I'm an artist who is a Christian, because there are many great pieces that we would deem as religious art because they're, religious subjects, but they weren't painted by Christians. They might have been sponsored by the church or someone who, belonged to the Catholic Church or Christian. But not every work that we would deem as religious or Christian was produced by a Christian. And not everything that I produce has any like really deep meaning or a Christian emphasis. Some things I just paint because I'm inspired and I love the beauty around me, or there's a character there, Lord of the Rings. I get inspired by the movies and the stories that are told, and I want to capture those stories. So,
well, this is a good opportunity for me to give a plug for our show for next week. Actually, I think we're going to be sort of continuing this theme because we're interviewing a guy, and he's going to be coming on our show to talk about storytelling and the power of storytelling to shape ideas and culture. And particularly, he's done focused research on the Disney movies. And it's a book. I just finished reading his book called The Trojan Mouse, and it's a history of Disney. And it's a very interesting book. I just read it in a couple of days. I heard him on another podcast, and he was willing to come on our show. And so hopefully Monique will be better by then. Otherwise, I'll be calling you. And we're going to talk about storytelling. And I thought he had some really interesting thoughts about the power of mythology and how that
Yeah.
can help shape our views as a culture, and looking at, in particular, at Disney and some of their endeavors of how they have helped to shape cultural values. And it just makes me
Right.
imagine the impact and power of storytelling. It's not innate to me. I'm such like a doggedly analytical person, but my children and my husband are very moved by storytelling and filmmaking. And so I love how
Right.
you're explaining this, because I can relate to it,
Right.
in your own endeavor. And I do think it's important not to just, like, some people are just wired that way. They are more artistic, but I love how you're bringing
Sure.
together like sound reasons for your faith with the art, because sometimes there's a tendency to think of artists like, well, all artists are just liberal and all artists are progressive, but you're kind of displaying a different approach to those things.
Yeah. And I like that you touched on a few things that um, I care a lot about, and I like to share with people, which is that art can really create a great environment and a great experience for people to engage with ideas that they may normally never engage with, especially if it's a biblical idea. And there's the first place where I had the exhibit down here in Florida was at a United Methodist Church. It's in downtown St. Pete, where the art district is, and right on the artist crawl line. Like, you can jump on the trolley and go to the artist crawl after you park your car and go to their exhibit. So they have a converted chapel that they are using as an outreach ministry. It's a gallery where people, local artists, Christian artists, can come. Sorry, artists that are Christian, I should say, um, can come and actually display their work. And people who would normally not set foot in the doors of a church are coming. And you can invite your friends to this, and have free parking, which is unheard of in most downtown places, especially in St. Pete. They can park their car, go to the exhibit, jump on the trolley, and go see the rest of the artist crawl. So it's just an incredible opportunity, and I loved it because one of the things that my thesis highlights is the fact that the arts really can create an environment where people can engage with different ideas, and that we should be encouraging our churches and encouraging our church members, is, even if they're not artists or maybe they're not big art advocates, to incorporate the arts more in their church, to encourage the artists in their churches, because they can create experiences whereby people can experience God. And I think that the arts are definitely going to be the way in which we reach our current culture, our post-truth culture, because they're elevating feelings above the truth. And so how do we actually reach the heart? Well, I think the art storytelling has a big role to play. And so I think, not just visual arts, but, encouraging your musicians and maybe your playwrights and your church to produce things that can really engage the heart and the mind.
Well, that's really neat. I'm going to go over to the chat box here a minute. Our friend Juad is asking Monique, because Monique is on the chat box. So if you guys want to talk to Monique, it's germ-free there in the chat box. And Juad wants to know what Monique's favorite gospel is. And she said it would have to be John. The Gospel of John is her favorite. In fact, we've been reading through that in our family devotions in recent weeks. So it is a good gospel. That's a good one. Our friend Cynthia Hampton says she has created a whole PowerPoint presentation on superhero movies and Christianity. Boy, I'd love to know more about that. Cynthia, I didn't know that you were a superhero fan. I'm learning something new here. That's very cool. And as you were talking, Rachel, it made me wonder about the issue of worldviews. Like, as a Christian who's an artist, or as an artist who's a Christian, how important is it, do you think, that artists understand the implications of their worldview, that they know how to communicate that? Like, should it just stand on its own and not have any worldview agenda, or is a worldview just naturally come through? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, art should be enjoyed. And because we were created in the image of God, we've been given the ability to create as well, not obviously from nothing, but we've been able to imagine and create, and that's a good thing. But I think that it never hurts for a Christian to really understand what they believe and why they believe it. And I think every Christian should absolutely engage in apologetic material so they can understand how to show their faith with gentleness and respect, and not be, nervous or scared about what will people ask me and what if I don't know how to answer them. I think it's just makes good sense to study apologetics and incorporate that into your daily routine. But I think for artists, there are a lot of artists who are famous or well known because their pieces do say something about the human experience, whether it be good or the evil, the depravity. I don't think a lot of artists who are well known because they did something just, fluffy. I don't know what other word to use. But yeah, I think that the worldview of an artist absolutely can come through in the piece, especially if they have the intention for it to come through. Well, so I think it is important that we think through our worldview.
I mean, probably one of the modern great example of that is C.S. Lewis. Like, the Narnia books are good art in and of themselves. They stand on their own, but they also introduce ideas about the Christian faith through the books and through the art. And so I think what I hear you saying is sort of finding that balance. You don't want to just jam Christianity into the art in an artificial way. You want the art to be quality and stand on its own, but ideally to also be provocative and maybe cause people to think or reconsider or consider more deeply their worldview.
Yeah, and C.S. Lewis is noted for saying, and I can't remember where he says this, if it's in a letter or if it's in one of his books, but he says that some people have thought that when he wrote the Narnia series, that he basically started off with this list of things he wanted to basically teach children or tell children, like about Christianity or something. And then he just like worked the story around it. And he said, no, that's not how it happened at all. That it started with this image of a fawn carrying an umbrella. And it just went from there, that it was the art first, the imagery first, and then the rest just naturally came through what he was writing because it was important to him, because it was a major part of his worldview.
So sort of an extension of himself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, what we believe can absolutely come through our work. So that's why I think we should be careful about knowing exactly what it is we believe and why we believe it, because people could be influenced by what we create.
So as you are an artist, what sort of obstacles have you faced that are maybe unique to working as an artist who's a Christian? Like, do people understand what you're up to? Do they tell you to go get a real job? Like, what are some of the obstacles that you've faced?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes the expectation that I might always just produce stuff that is religious in nature. I remember somebody one time asking me why, when I made a sunset, why I didn't like paint the cross as the sun. And yeah,
I'm sure they meant well.
I'm sure they meant well, but I roll my eyes but that's a normal, I think, a feeling I think in some churches is that, we're going to walk down the hallway. We expect to see a portrait of Jesus and maybe the disciples, which is fine. And I actually enjoy those. But I think that art that is produced by Christians and art period can be enjoyed also because if you believe in objective beauty, which that's a whole nother discussion, but if you believe in objective beauty, then, God can use all art, no matter if it's produced by a Christian or not a Christian. So for me, a challenge has been that, and also, and I think sometimes I put that on myself as well, this expectation to always produce something that's really meaningful and life-changing and conveys my Christian faith. But the other thing too is the arts community is very as a whole, very different from my ideology. And so finding a community of people who are artists, who are Christians, and we may not always agree on everything within Christianity, has been really helpful. So SIVA has been a great help to have that community of Christians who are also artists, and then just to see other people producing things. Like I said earlier, the Fellowship of Performing Arts, producing these awesome plays on C.S. Lewis's works. So those have been encouraging. And I think the people within the churches and any of my parents who have encouraged me over the years has been really helpful.
Okay, I'm just responding on the chat here a second. Okay. So let me ask you this question, Rachel, as we kind of wrap up this segment. You know what? I have my daughter Emily here. I know my other daughter Abby's watching in the other room. They're both artists. What words of wisdom would you have for a Christian who's an aspiring artist and maybe not even necessarily young, but maybe they're trying to work on their craft? Like, what words of wisdom would you give to them?
Yeah, do all things unto the glory of God. So, take a lot of pride in your work, making sure that it's quality work, and taking the time to really find inspiration and find a community of people that can encourage you. Because, the whole idea of a starving artist, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but it's very true that a lot of artists don't make a whole lot of money, so they often have to have other types of work. So don't be discouraged, because I went for years, many years, doing jobs that I didn't particularly care for, but I did because I needed to make money, and so it would give me the opportunity to continue pursuing my craft. But I think being open to using your skills in ways that maybe you didn't think that you would, and also as Christians, you just be encouraged that, God has made you in his image, that he has given you the ability to imagine and create, and that's good. And that, in the Old Testament, when God was giving directions for how to build the tabernacle, like he said, paint these different images and, paint pomegranates, and they were in colors that you don't normally see. And they were basically imaginative pomegranates. So, God is for the arts, and that the work that you're doing, do it to his glory.
That's so good. I have like 45 other questions I really want to ask you, but I'm going to switch gears here, and let's talk a little bit about in a minute here of what's been happening in the United Methodist Church. But before we do that, I want to make sure that all of our viewers are reminded of how they can attend the Women in Apologetics conference that's coming up, and they will again be able to see your art exhibit and experience. And it's not too late to register. They can come in person to the conference at Biola University. And you're doing a breakout session. Monique and I are doing a breakout session, and they're going to hear some really great speakers. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Women in Apologetics conference and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, it's exciting. The Find Your Voice theme is something that when we sat down with the people at Biola, we were just all excited about that theme. I think it's timely, not just for women, but for Christians as well, to find our voice on different topics. So I'm excited that we have so many different topics covered. I mean, you guys are doing critical race theory. We've got someone doing truth, of course, the basics, the resurrection and the existence of God. And then we have people talking about how do you have a conversation with Gen Z, with Jane Pantig, who you've had on the show.
Yeah.
She's doing that one. And then we have, AJ Roberts from Reasons to Believe. She's doing hers on basically the intersection of faith and science. And then mine's on the intersection of the arts and apologetics. So it's exciting that we're kind of touching on different things that may mean something to different people because they're in different professions. I think that's really awesome.
I think it's such a great array of women apologists. And I always like to clarify that it's not a women's conference.
Right.
Men are invited. We're not excluding men. It's just that all the speakers are women apologists. And it's a great way for us to try to develop new apologists, because often there aren't as many, just quite candidly, there aren't as many speaking opportunities for women to be on the speaking circuit. And so this is a great way to try to platform some women who are up and coming and more established. And so we're going to be hearing from our friend Natasha Crane, who is more of an established apologist. But then we're hearing from some people that you might not know that are, just equally wonderful. And we want to give them a platform. There's graphic. Our friend Hillary Ferrer is going to be there, the Mama Bear Apologetics author, and others. And if people aren't going to be there in person, we want to mention the live stream. And
it's the first year that we have breakout sessions added. So we have 2 worship times, the 4 keynotes, and 3 breakouts, and in addition, our Q&A panel, which you're going to be on. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great to see all of the different things, because I want to encourage people, if you can't come in person, think about inviting some people over to your home. Think about, creating almost like an event. It's not too late. You can just get on social media, start networking, and create an event at your house. Invite some people over for the day. It's going to be some amazing presentations. And in between the sessions, you can have some fellowship, you can have some lunch, you can talk, and just create an awesome experience right where you are. And it's not an expensive thing, but this would be a great way to introduce your family and friends to apologetics, because there's we try to really keep it so that we're onboarding new people into these conversations.
Right. It's exciting to have a long list of women that we want to platform. That's a good problem.
Yes.
to have. So the exciting thing too about the live stream event with the 3 breakouts is that it pretty much means that there's going to be continuous streaming except for breaks in the lunch break on Saturday.
Yeah.
And so I've had a couple of people ask me on the East Coast, what do I do? Because it's, Pacific time. I said, hey, some people are doing women's retreats and doing pajama parties, so you could start Friday night, have a pajama party, wake up in the morning, worship and have breakfast together, maybe have some games in the morning and have some of your own speakers at your church do a couple of sessions on something. And then, join us again from 12 to 8 p.m. Eastern time.
It's great. We're getting a question in our chat box from our friend Jawad, who I want to let everyone know Jawad is a Muslim, but he loves the show and he loves to tune in and talk to us about his questions about the faith. So this is a good one for Rachel and I to kind of field. He says, does Christianity have any limitations in terms of carving statues? And, I think that there's some question about that, because there are churches that do engage in that. And then there's some commandments about that. So maybe, Rachel, what are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so he's probably specifically referring to make no graven images.
The second commandment in Exodus chapter 20. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there have definitely been statues made over the years, and not just statues, but of course paintings. And Krista, you and I were just talking about this a few days ago, because especially in the early Catholic Church, a lot of images started to pop up of Christians who had gone before, martyrs, and they were meant to be an encouragement to Christians to stay strong in the faith and to look at those who have gone before and that they laid down their lives for their faith. And but over the years, over the centuries, some people, not everyone, of course, but some people began to kind of pray to those images and in a sense, worship them, or the veneration of saints. And so there was a strong contrast, strong reaction to that
Yeah.
with the Protestant church. And
I think that's a really important distinction that you're bringing up. In the history of Christianity, there's kind of two streams. There's East and West. And in the East, they use what are called icons. And iconography is quite ancient. I mean, it goes back to the early church of, 2nd century, 100s. It's very early. And icons were not intended to be literal. In fact, they're highly symbolic. For example, if somebody has a large forehead, that means something. I think it means they have great wisdom. If somebody has a beard, it means something. If they have their left hand raised or their right hand raised, or their fingers are doing something, the colors have symbolic meaning. And there's a whole kind of art of what's called reading icons. You don't just look at an icon, you read an icon. It's like reading a book almost. And everything in the icon has symbolic meaning. So it's not intended to be like what you're doing, Rachel, is more of realism. When you paint somebody's picture, you want it to look like that person. But icons are not intended to look like the person. They're more symbolic.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, Christians in the East use them to inspire them to pray and inspire them to live like those people. It's like when I was a kid hanging a poster on my wall of my favorite sports hero. And it would cause me to be inspired to, maybe if I really like basketball, I wanted to play as good as Michael Jordan, and we would be inspired by these images. Well, it's sort of similar to that. Maybe I feel inspired by looking at the American flag, and it's very special, and it gives me a special feeling and connection when I look at it. And it's a sense in America, we call it patriotism. And so icons are kind of function a little bit like that for Christians in the East. In the Western tradition, over time, in mid to later Catholicism, because remember, Catholicism didn't even exist until 1000 AD. The tradition in the West was more about carving statues. And that's a little bit different than how they do it in the East. So your question, Juad, about limitations, when Protestants come along, as Rachel was saying, Protestants, one of the things that they do is they want to do away with all images of God. Right. And they see them as a violation of the second commandment. And they would say that God was to not take a form or an image, to the point that in some Protestant denominations, it's almost blasphemy to even have a picture of Jesus hanging on the wall in your church, and you wouldn't do that.
Right. So, or Jesus hanging on the cross.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So there's some differences among Christians about some of those limitations. I think Christians are pretty united about not worshiping the images themselves. They're supposed to be venerated, which is not the same thing as worship. So it's different than idolatry. It's rather more closer to our idea of inspiring us to worship. And so it's important to make that distinction. However, that's not to say that sometimes it does degenerate into a form of idolatry. And so Protestants historically, wanting to avoid that trap, have steered away from using images by and large in their worship. So
yeah, and you're right about the early church, would have been influenced by Rome as well, which is why I think we, as early as, like you said, the 2nd century, we already have some images starting to pop up. Before then, it was mostly just symbols, and especially because Christians were hiding and on the run, they didn't have a whole lot of time to, produce art. So most of the quote unquote art that they created during the 1st century would have been just symbols, across
the fish and loaves.
The fish, fish and loaves. And then one of the first images that shows up in the 2nd century is Jesus with the lamb over his shoulders. And then you have some other images start popping up.
Yeah. So that's kind of a crash course on the interesting world of Christianity and using images. So hopefully that helps you out, Jawad, in your question. And as usual, you always have very thoughtful questions about our faith, and you seem to be quite familiar with many aspects of our faith. I think that, all right, let's get into, before we round out the show here, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the United Methodist Church, and this is our tweet of the week. This is where we cue it. All right. Monique's not here to dance with me. It's very sad. It's just me.
I'll rock it.
Yeah. Okay, so the tweet of the week came from Beckett Cook, who is a former, he would identify himself, I think it's fair to say, as a former gay man, became a Christian a few years ago. And I think I have his tweet here. There it is. He became a Christian, and he posted a link to this big article that was in the New York Times earlier today. And he just quoted this verse from 2 Timothy 4:3. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. And I thought that was a pretty powerful tweet coming from Mr. Cook, as somebody who has come out of the gay lifestyle and come into Christ, and having his desires transformed. I think it's sort of an interesting take on it, in really differentiating the problem or the situation in the United Methodist Church. And again, Rachel, you're a lifelong Wesleyan, and Wesleyans are, I think, a type of Methodist. I think I got that right. And so talk to us a little bit about what has been happening in the United Methodist Church, and then we'll get into some of the more recent events.
Yeah, about 3 years ago from February, the Way Forward, which was the campaign that was tasked to delegates, to a group of delegates to discuss and come up with some plans to propose to the General Conference in 2019, spring 2019, to basically address what has been going on for a long time, which is that there are churches predominantly in the West and the North of the United States, and then in the UK and other places, that wanted to allow those who are practicing homosexuals to be ordained within the United Methodist Church, and to allow same-sex unions. So there were 3 different proposals that were made in the spring of last year. And one was the progressive plan, one was the traditional plan, and one was called the One Church plan. And so the one that won the votes was the traditional plan, which they chose to stay with their views on same-sex marriage, that they would not permit it, that their stance is that for traditional marriage between one man and one woman.
So now part of the issue in play here has been there. I mean, historically, this is not a new controversy. Like, United Methodists have been in this conversation about same-sex relationships, same-sex marriage, ordaining gay and lesbian, what are they called? Priests in the United Methodist Church? I don't know what they're called.
Pastors.
Ministers, yeah.
Ministers,
so
yeah.
That's been a couple of decades that discussion has been happening. But more recently, in February, there was kind of the big national meeting where some big decisions were finally made. It was like they had the world's longest study committee. Like, I've never heard of of a denomination taking like 20, 30 years to decide an issue, but But really what was behind it, I think, was a good thing, and that they were wanting unity. Didn't want to just immediately like split off, which Protestants are very good at doing. Like, the word protest is right in our title. So, you get mad, you go off, you splinter off, and you do your own thing. And I mean, I admire the fact that Methodists take Jesus's words in the high priestly prayer very seriously, of trying to stay united. And so they were taking their time in deciding this matter. However, in February, it really came to a head, where there were these three plans. Now, you ran us through them briefly. Like, one was the one church plan, which was the plan of kind of, we're just going to let each church decide on its own whether it's going to go down a progressive path or the traditional marriage path. And then the second position was more the traditional position, and that was backed by the group,
the Wesleyan Covenant Association.
The Wesleyan Covenant Association, yeah. So I think we have a screen cap of their website. So these are the people who are advocating for the more traditional position of, we're not going to ordain active practicing homosexuals, and we're not going to engage in allowing marriages, same-sex marriages. Those are sort of the two big issues. Then there was a third route of the progressive position, where we're just going to have the whole United Methodist Church be progressive and go down that path. So those were sort of the three plans that were laid out. The one church plan did not win. The traditional plan won, but there's some interesting dynamics there of how it won. Like, talk to us a little bit about some of those events of how it was that the traditional position won.
Yeah, I think predominantly the reason why it won was because, the United Methodist Church is not just a church, are not just churches in the United States. They are in Europe, in Africa, South America, and some other places as well. And so the delegates from Africa and South America and Russia predominantly were the ones that were pushing for the traditional plan. And because there are countries in Africa where it's still illegal for homosexuality itself is illegal. And so they weren't going to be able to align themselves with the church if it went progressive.
So I think that was a really interesting moment. And that was sort of before we started the show, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it last February. But the African delegates were and the South American delegates were really pushing for the traditional position. And that's what gave the votes to pass the traditional plan, and why the one church plan failed, because the United Methodist Church is a global church. It's not just an American church. And there was an impassioned speech that was given by one of the African bishops, basically, and I read the transcript of this last February, and he was basically telling the progressives in America, stop trying to rewrite doctrine. Stop trying to rewrite what the church says. And this is what the Bible teaches. And it was pretty direct toward the progressives. And those votes from the African and the South American delegates ended up winning the day at that convention. So now today, it was announced the actual plan for what the United Methodist Church is going to do. And basically it's going to now officially divide. So kind of walk us through sort of some of the broad parameters of that.
Yeah, so it's basically the traditional churches that are going to be leaving the United Methodist Church. And so they're going to be forming their own denomination. And based on the research that I've done so far, because it is such new news, but we've kind of seen the writing on the wall, is that once the annual conference, which happens in each state or region, there's states that are included sometimes in one annual conference. Once they make a decision, then each church, basically, I believe from what I've read, will have their administrative council, which I'm on my church's administrative council. They will meet, and if someone makes a motion that they want the church to vote on whether or not they will stay within the United Methodist Church or if they want to leave, then it has to be seconded, of course, it has to be passed, and then they have 60 days, the church has 60 days to hold a church conference that the district superintendent of that area, so we're in the Gulf Central District, that superintendent would have to attend, conduct that church's conference, and then the church members, they have to give them enough notice, of course, they would attend, and then there would be a vote. And so then that church would get to decide what, if they want to stay within the United Methodist Church denomination or if they want to leave.
So those who are leaving are going to be those who are on the more traditional or conservative position. Right. And those who will be staying in the United Methodist Church are those who are, we might say, a more progressive stream. And so every church now is going to have to decide, where are we going? Like what bucket are we going to go in? And they're going to have some sort of vote about that. And so it's really kind of forcing churches that up until now had been living, because there have been sort of three approaches to even dealing with this on the local level. Like some churches would just remain conservative if their senior minister was conservative, and that was sort of how they were going. Other churches were more progressive, and that was pretty well known. And then there were some churches that were kind of in the middle of we're not going to take an official position. We're just going to kind of whosoever God brings to the church may come type of thing. But we're not going to take an official position about this. Now everybody's going to have to kind of decide what stream they're going to go in.
Yeah. And no matter what, there's going to be a lot of changes in the local churches because you're going to either have, if the church doesn't call for a vote to decide if they want to stay with the denomination or if they want to leave, then you're going to have conservative people leaving those churches and looking for the traditional churches that are going to be creating a new denomination. So no matter what happens, you're going to have people leaving. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but just because the United Methodist Church has had a long history of togetherness.
Yeah.
So
now in California, where I live, the United Methodist churches are mostly liberal. Some are more middle of the road, but you kind of have to go church by church. Now, I know in other parts of the country, they can be more traditional, and it just sort of depends. Now, the United Methodist Church officially, in their Book of Discipline, which is their official kind of doctrine book, doesn't endorse gay marriage, and it doesn't allow for ministers to marry same-sex couples. And that was part of the question, because many churches were open about recruiting people in the LGBT community, actively recruiting those people into their fellowships, and then they would want to get married. And the Book of Discipline didn't allow that, and that's what's kind of created this whole thing is sort of coming to a head now. So it would be unfair to say that all Methodist churches allow gay and lesbian same-sex marriages. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and there were churches in the West and in the North, United Methodist churches, who were already conducting same-sex marriages and ordaining practicing homosexuals, and not just pastors, but also district superintendents and bishops. And so it came to the point where, because they were going against the Book of Discipline, which is also it's kind of structured like our judicial system in the United States, the Book of Discipline. So because nothing was being done to actually prevent it or to reprimand those who are going against the Book of Discipline, that's why I think it all really just came to a head, and they realized we've got to address this, and that's why the Way Forward was started.
So when we think about what's going to happen in the future, and I want to let people know that I actually took the time to look up and read through the official document that came out from the study group or the committee. I don't know what the proper nomenclature is, but I read through it. It's a lot of legal language, but people can get it if you want to search for this document. The Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation is the name of the document, and people can get that document. It has all the protocols in it. I really feel like I need Lori Stewart, our lawyer friend, to read through it and interpret some of it for us. But basically, it's an amicable way of separating the denomination, and so that those churches that leave the United Methodist Church won't lose their buildings. The traditional churches that stay in the traditional stream, the conservative stream, will be able to keep their buildings. They're also going to receive some financial remuneration. So there's a lot of aspects to this, but they've agreed to kind of peaceably part company, if you will, and that
Right.
That's all outlined in that document. If any of the nerds out there want to know about it, or if they're Methodists who are watching, I know my friend Susanna's watching, and she is a United Methodist, so she's listening in on everything that we're saying right now. Now, we should probably clarify that we in no way want to villainize our friends and family who belong to the LGBT community or who are gay affirming. I mean, I know that you have friends who are gay, and we love them, and we invite them. We want to invite them into our local churches. We want to create a space for them. But our position is, as the Book of Discipline says in the United Methodist Church, and as Christians have historically affirmed, that being gay is something that God can set you free from, and that's not God's ultimate plan for your life. That's not how you were created to be. So I just kind of was wondering what your thoughts are about that, and just clarifying what we're saying here.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, what you're saying. And yeah, I do have friends that are gay, and people who are gay affirming. And when I say that, like for gay marriage and everything. And just like a lot of things, we all, it's hard to talk about. We all struggle with something. And so I have a lot of respect for people who are gay, my friends who are gay, and those who are gay affirming. They are made in the image of God as well, and they have equal value, dignity, and worth. And so I have nothing but love for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's really important, that not get lost in all of this, is just clarifying this is going to apparently become the dividing line in our culture of so many churches. I don't think this isn't the first church to split over this issue, and I don't think it's going to be the last. Because this is becoming kind of the defining issue of our time, of what is going to set apart the historic Christian faith on what Christians have traditionally affirmed versus a more progressive point of view. So, anyways, that's kind of a little bit about that. So if people want to check out the New York Times article, they can do that. It just came out earlier today. United Methodist Church announces plan to split over same-sex marriage, and people can read about it there. So, thanks for helping me out, Rachel.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure and honor, and I'm sad Monique wasn't there, though.
I know, right? But Rachel was a good sport, coming on at the last minute. Text her like an hour and a half before the show.
My arm.
Oh, will you please help me? So anyways, I think that, we got a couple of comments, so this will be a good way to sort of round things out. Monique says, thank you for filling in, Rachel. And I think Dan is watching us today. And he, I think, maybe has a different point of view than we do. And that's fine. We welcome that on the issue of the LGBT community in the church. And he says, if you knew God, you wouldn't be vain. God can set you free from your vanity. I'm assuming he's talking to us, Rachel. It's not terribly clear, but that's okay. I think, Dan, if we've said anything that's come across as prideful, I think Rachel said it really well that, we're both sinners. We both struggle. Yeah. Every Christian has struggles that they have to go through and that we ask the Holy Spirit to help us with. And then we invite that transforming power to help us come more and more in conformity with the image of Christ. And it's just that we, at all the things, and Rachel and all of our friends at Women in Apologetics, we just take the view that the issue of homosexuality is a sin, just like any other sin. And it is a struggle for some people, and none of us are better than anyone else when it comes to a struggle with sin. We all have our struggles, and some of them are very hard, and we struggle with them for our whole lives. But by God's grace, we continue to walk in faith, cooperate with the power of the Holy Spirit, and our hope is not to condemn anybody. It's just to invite people like Beckett Cook that we started the segment with, to walk into the transforming power of the Holy Spirit. So,
amen. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that it's just a really big conversation that we're having right now in our culture about, and I think I did a video week before last. I posted it on the revoice position that's coming into the church. And really the big question that we have to wrestle with is whether or not sexual orientation is something that is inborn, in the sense of like it can be inborn in different people in different ways, or whether all of us are created by God's design for what we call heterosexual marriage. I mean, that's really what a lot of the debate is going to come down to. So it's the big question of our time, in the cultural moment that we're in, as to how that works. So
right. And I know people who have come out of.
I'm hearing some moaning upstairs. Are you coming to be on the show? Okay.
I was going to say, I know people who have come out of the homosexual lifestyle, and it has a deep psychological effect.
Okay.
And so.
All right. So we have a request from a 5-year-old viewer. So Monique's going to be on camera.
Hi.
She would only do this. She would only do this for a child. Let me tell you, friends.
Maria Kane said, totally off topic, but my 5-year-old asked to watch you guys every night at bedtime, and after your last few weeks of illness, she specifically wants to see both of you. Hi. Yes.
Well, that child knew how to get you out of bed, because no adult would get out of bed for them. But if it was a child, yeah, she would.
Yeah, no, I would not get out of bed for any adult. No, but a 5-year-old, yes. How awesome and amazing.
Andrew, and I love your shirt.
Thank you. Yes, I don't know what camera I should be looking at. Maybe this one. Yes, yeah. Women in Apologetics. Here it is.
Yeah.
Yes, there it is. Yes. Thank you for praying, Kimba. Yes, guys can hear I sound like I just woke up, or I don't know.
You're breathing all over me.
My voice is deep. Sorry.
I told Monique earlier.
Oh, my eyes. Y'all, my eyes are swollen. People. Woo, somebody pray.
Okay, we're going to sign off now.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Juwan. All right, bye.
Aww. I told Monique she needs to just ask for a tray of tea and soup and be like, and walk away.
Well, I want to thank you, everyone. Thanks for all your comments and engaging us in the chat box. And I'm going to go on the chat box here in a few minutes when we sign off and answer some of your questions. And so if you want to stay tuned for that, I will do that. Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
There's nothing